Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being patient. A couple of technical difficulties, and just like everything else along with the pandemic, we're trying to figure out how to just cope with those things. There's also a little bit of a challenge about tomorrow's guest. So if you're tuning in and you were wanting to see Tawny Katane, I just got a note that there's a little scheduling issue. She's got a little bit of a medical problem. So we're going to see if we can try and either do it another time or record it so that you can come in tomorrow at this time and see Tawny. Before we get started today, I want to thank my sponsors at 5 Star Guitars. 5 Star has been an incredible support of All Access Live. They have a link set up. So if you are interested in playing guitar, go to 5starguitars.com/all access live. You'll find a whole bunch of pages there that have great accessories, cases, lots of all guitar pieces that you can get discounts on. So if you use the promo code of All Access 15, you'll get 15% off, and there's no sales tax. So if you're looking for guitars or lessons or repairs, hit up 5 Star Guitars, let them know that I sent you. They'll appreciate it. Now, before we get started, let me just tell you a little bit about my guest today. We first met many years ago in Montana, Bozeman, Montana. I believe 1982, 7th grade was the first time. But through high school, as I became a wannabe rock star, this next guest was one of the greatest jazz drummers in the area. He had been studying for a while. He had this cool, suave, debonair vibe, which completely intimidated me. So fast forward to 30 years later, the last handful of years, we've really gotten to know each other, and all of those, the pretense of, intimidation went away. And I could see that this guy in his heart was not only a great drummer, but he's also a really solid human being. We share a lot of commonalities and good heartaches, good laughs. And so we're hoping to share those with you today. And so I want to thank my buddy, Ken Glynn. Thank you for being here, Ken. How you doing, sir?
Thanks, Kevin. Wow, what an introduction. I'm great. Thanks for having
Uh,
me.
I was going to preface that by welcoming you and the other sex symbol, Tawny Katane, but she couldn't make it today. So
Oh,
I,
darn it.
yeah. Hey man, thank you for making this happen. I appreciate the backdrop that you've got there. Looks like there's some guitars and let me just make you big so I can see what's back there. All right, so we've got guitars, we've got a studio set up there.
Yeah,
Um,
this is
yeah,
Chris Cunningham's Base Camp Studios, basecamrecording.com. It's a really neat setup. I've done a lot of voiceovers and some drumming out here, so figured it'd
right
be a fun
on.
place to meet with you.
Do you bring your kid out there, or does he have one set up?
I bring mine, yeah,
Okay.
and sometimes I'll just be doing hand drums, so that's easier to pack in and out.
Uh,
But yeah, I have had my kit here a couple times, and it's a great place to record.
I do remember Chris being an incredibly talented songwriter too from back in the high school days. So was he one of the transplants that moved away and they came back?
He is, yeah. There's so many of us. I didn't move too far away, but he was all over the country, and I think he went to school in Spain for a little while. Did some recording with Johnny, of course, Story Hill, and
Yeah.
lived out in Seattle. Now he's back and firmly planted here with his recording studio, and he's right at
And
the foothills of Highlight back here. So it's
oh
beautiful.
wow. I
Yeah,
love that area, man.
yeah.
If you guys are not from Montana, the place that he's talking about right there is one of the most incredibly beautiful places on the planet, which is what everybody else figured out, and they all moved there, right? So, which drove all the crazy prices way up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's nuts.
and he's another guy too. I remember just being so talented that he was intimidating, right? So we
Hmm.
can touch on that a little bit. I know that what I remember with the clouded memory that I do have, just seeing you in jazz bands and drumline and the basketball or the football games. You were playing drums with my buddy Vic, and
Hmm.
both you guys were much more accomplished drummers. And so I held you at
Oh.
this high regard where I felt like I need to get there, but I also have to hate him along the way, right? Because that's what we do in high school. So I it, I
Oh,
never did.
the feeling was mutual, Kev. It's like mutual intimidation club. I mean, you were amazing. You'd get out there on the basketball court floor, just nailing, Land of a Thousand Dances and all these great pep band songs, getting everybody charged up. And I'm this jazz drummer that plays at 7:30 in the morning on Thursdays or something, and might have a concert once in a while. But man, you stole the show. You were always front and center, and I always admired that about you, that you could just get out there and you were a total entertainer from the start.
I was an attention whore. That's what you're saying. I was. I know. I know, and I still am. Damn it. But
No, that's good.
yeah.
It's served you really well. So
When you were doing that, like when growing up in high school, and you were playing in a jazz band and doing those concerts, did you have aspirations to get out there and become a successful drummer as a career?
absolutely, yeah. I mean, I felt like that's about all I had going for me back then. It was like, I mean, I wanted to, I guess when I was in Mrs. Safford's writing class, I really discovered I love writing, so I went after that a little bit. Really didn't get fully into that until about college, but I think it was pretty much, yeah, music and drinking. That
Right.
was what I wanted to major in. So,
Were it's interesting to think about that. Vic, my buddy then, we would go to like the keggers, like the high school parties. Were you at those keggers where like a lot of the jocks and were hanging out and partying there? Or were you, like quiet home drinker?
I was both. I mean,
Okay.
I would probably start off at home and then I'd go to those occasionally, but um, cakes are kind of dangerous.
I know. Well, I
you
know.
know,
I mean, the only thing is, like, I would go there with Vic
yeah,
to make some sort of, uh, statement by not drinking, but we would
right.
pound Jolts. If you remember those back in the day, Jolt was like
Yeah,
eight Mountain Dews in one, and we'd
yeah,
get completely hyped up on this ridiculous caffeine drink, and then do stupid shit because we still wanted to be crazy like everybody else, and just have them see that we could do it. Somehow we thought that, like being under the influence of caffeine was a lot different than what everybody else was
yeah.
doing, but
I can relate
I
to that.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think once I quit drinking, I was really about the caffeine. I was still into seeing how I could alter my perceptions a little bit, or at least alter my speed, with caffeine. But so I totally relate to that. Just wanting to be a little bit out of the here and now.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, the vice, right, the caffeine thing, like having to have it right when you wake up. I noticed that,
Yeah.
I go back and forth. I vacillate where I can, if I wean myself off coffee, um the headaches start to go away, and I'm pretty good for quite a while, and I recognize that I'm not as fatigued as I thought I would be, right? And
Hmm.
then for some reason, it's just like drinking or anything else. You think, well, I mean, a cup of coffee sounds pretty good, and then it
Hmm.
turns into I need coffee, and if I don't get it, I'm going to be
Yep.
an asshole. And yeah, I've switched to some caffeinated tea. It's a little bit
Uh-huh.
less intense right now, but as long as I drink it out of my Mister Rogers cup, then I feel like, I'm like it's somehow not as bad for me, right?
Do
So
you have like a special sweater that you put on and special shoes like when you drink your tea, or
I wear my purple
sorry.
shirt. I know I wear my purple shirt, and I just found
Yeah.
out that there's a Mister Rogers Museum in Pittsburgh,
Wow.
and so we're playing a show in Pittsburgh in May, and I'm going,
Wow.
man. I
Awesome.
You think about all the rock star like gigs or like trips where you think you might do something crazy and chaotic. Yeah, that's my excitement. I'm going to go to Pittsburgh and go to the Mister Rogers Museum because he's
That's
awesome.
about
He's a badass.
He is. That's about my speed these days. I'm like I'm a boring guy, especially
Yeah.
this year.
Yeah. Well, do you think the pandemic slowed you down?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
How
I
so?
think I was pedal to the metal with so many projects, sun up to sun way beyond sundown, and yeah, I don't know how we were all doing that back then. I'm
Back
trying
then,
to
like a
get,
year ago?
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
trying to get my speed back up to that because I don't know. I like to be productive. I like to make stuff, and I'm like you. I just like to get out and constantly be. I'm a content junkie. I like to
Yeah.
create content for the web and music, and just I always want to be creating stuff. So
So that in mind, I mean, you talked about how the desire to be a professional musician was on your radar in high school, and you've been able to really combine that passion. I know that you talked about playing hand drums and drum set at Chris's place. Do you find that what you've done musically is something that's fulfilling in that regard? Maybe not during the pandemic, but is it
yeah.
something that you recognize? Yeah, I mean, I get what I need out of it. It's this sort of
Oh
nurture.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think I've spent most of my creative career working on original music, like just exploring that. And I've really been lucky to be with a lot of great songwriters that are writing original music, and we're just kind of exploring not always new territory, but at least original territory. And we might sound like other bands sometimes, but sometimes, man, we played some weird stuff. It's a blast. I mean, it's so elastic. You can do so much with music, and I think my goal has been to play every kind of music in my lifetime. Of course, you never, but that's my goal. Is just I feel like I'm like that ball of tar that's rolling down the hill and picking things up as it goes along. Kind of a, is that a metamorphic rock or a conglomerate
Sure.
or something like
But
that? Just
what tar has stuck for you the most? What do you feel like? No, really. I mean, like
yeah,
stylistically, musically, some people really get into certain styles and genres, and I know that you've
yeah.
gotten into like East Indian music and
Hmm.
some like Afro-Cuban stuff, I think, right?
I
So
love that stuff. I'm not very good at it, but yeah, I love Afro-Cuban. It's
it's
awesome.
tough. Yeah,
It
it's,
is,
it's hard
yeah.
hard to be a square Montana white man and have
Yeah, it
this
is.
deeply rooted, like tribal vibe, but that really is where it comes from. I
Yeah.
remember being there in Bozeman playing in a reggae band, like three white males and a white female that sounded more like the Police playing
Mm,
reggae than
right.
Marley. But we
Oh,
do all the
police
ski
are awesome.
resorts. Oh, the Police are
Yeah.
amazing, of
Yeah.
course. But yeah, it would probably fall into more of the
Sure.
ska, pop punk vibe than true traditional reggae. But
Yeah.
the One Drop, right, was it was like not so much Stewart's thing, but I remember actually
Hmm.
thinking that you were really, yeah, your playing reminded me a lot of Stewart. Even though you may have been in the jazz band, but your rock drumming reminded me a lot of Stewart Copeland, which is
Oh, well,
awesome because I
thanks.
was a huge fan. Yeah,
Yeah, I am too. I mean, I probably stole half of my fills from him. I mean, it's hi hat stuff. I mean, talk about a guy that totally reinvents an instrument.
big time. Yeah,
I don't. I mean, there's been some amazing players that have done some cool stuff with hi hat, but um, somehow for me and my background, growing up as I did, that was just mind blowing to hear what Stuart Copeland can do on a hi hat, and just the rest of his kit is amazing.
who else do you felt like were a big
Yeah, but
influence?
I'm sorry. Did you say who else is big influence?
Yeah.
Well, uh, I'll go ahead and fess up. Neil Peart.
Yeah.
I really glommed onto him. Of course, when we were in fifth grade and Tom Sawyer comes out, then it's just this amazing, cool sound, and everybody's into it. And then I didn't really listen to Rush at all until I think sophomore year. And I was hanging out with like Joe Lairbaster and
Oh yeah.
some other guys in the class of '86, 2 years ahead of us, and just kind of partying with them. And they got me back into Rush big time. And some of their, I think they're on Power Windows was their album at that point. And so I picked that up, and I was just hooked from then. And I just bought their whole discography, and I think I've bought every album since. But um, you know, that's amazing music, and I learned a lot from it, and it pushed me to try to explore different time signatures and fills and things. But um, you get out into the playing world with players, and unless you're King Crimson or somebody, that kind of style is can be a little obnoxious. I'm
Certainly
not.
limits your ability to get other gigs, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I remember, you mentioned jazz band. I remember playing in jazz band and obviously overplaying in jazz band in high school. And Howard Reinhardt behind me,
Oh
just kind of whispering in my ear. He's like, "Keep it simple, stupid."
Oh
And
yeah. Wow, he
and
had that down then, huh?
he did, and it took me, I don't know, another 10 years to even figure out what that meant, or to be interested in simple to where I
I'm
could
still
like.
working on it.
Me too. Well, no, you can do it, man. I'll get to that later, but I mean, you've got the groove. You've got that down. I have to sort of unlearn a lot of that stuff that the progressive stuff that kind of messes with my fills and things.
You probably have recordings from that era and past. Do you go back and listen to those and just think, All right. Well, it's impressive that I could pull that off. It's completely inappropriate for the music, and my stuff is full of that, right? And
Oh yeah, me too. Yeah. Well, I remember playing with Rob Kohler. You mentioned him when you were on with John a couple weeks ago.
yeah,
And we were putting together a soundtrack for an animated film that I was working on in film school. And I hopped on the drum kit and I was playing along. We were sort of, it was a little bit of a Peter Gabriel groove kind of thing, African-ish sounding drums. And I started getting really into it. And of course, Rob's like he's like just so magnificent, and he is dynamics. He knows how to start low and come up high, and I didn't know that, and so I was just like hammering those drums, and we got to the end of that recording. He's like, dude, you totally buried me, and he wasn't like upset, but
yeah.
he taught me something that day. And that was maybe the beginning of me sort of starting to pull back as a drummer and just like, okay, not what can I show people, but what does this song need? What does this ensemble need? And how can I provide that without like making a big deal about it?
That's a gift, honestly.
It
One thing
is,
for
yeah.
Rob to be able to present that to you, but
Yeah.
for you not to wall that off and feel intimidated and sort of and guarded, right? I mean, our tendency when somebody calls us out on something is to block it out and say, "Ah, screw those guys, man. They don't know what they're."
Yeah.
Obviously, Rob knows what he's talking about, and
Oh yeah.
uh, my first experience with Rob, it's interesting. My dad hooked me up with my very first gig with Rob at a at what's the big art gallery in Billings, the Yellowstone Art Center?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So my first gig was at Yellowstone Art Center, I
Uh-huh.
think junior year, and Rob was playing bass, and it was a standard jazz gig, and I was so square, right? I mean, I'd been playing in my my bedroom, and but Rob pulled me into that progressive rock thing. Energy Positive was like the first real original band that I was in, where it
Yeah.
was with Prague, and he was this incredible, influence. He'd had his Montreux Jazz Festival experience already with In Flight, and I remember him introducing me to so much great music. Brecker
Mm-hmm.
Brothers was a big thing for him, and of course Jaco Pastorius, and
Mm-hmm.
the drumming that he introduced me to was so out of my league. All I was thinking about at that point was Motley Crue and Scorpions and Kiss and all that stuff. I was a
Mm-hmm.
hairband guy,
Yeah.
and for him, he just opened my eyes to it. So it wasn't as intimidating because he had this way of approaching things to help to make you feel like this is a journey that he's going to go with you on,
Yeah.
and instead of ridiculing you, because if you're and I don't know if you're anything like me, man, I've met so many people along the way that are incredible musicians, but are condescending. They had that sort of pretentious vibe, like
Yes.
they've played with the greatest, so the Buddy Rich mentality, right? Like they've played with the
Mm-hmm.
greatest, and so they're just going to let you know that they're already great, and no matter what you do, you just can't win.
Yeah.
I Rob was never that way,
Yeah.
and he really made me a much better drummer. So
He does. He's
when
got
you
that
were
that way about him.
when you were playing with other bands, like in that era, high school, and oh, hey, look, John Wilson's here.
Hey,
Rob's
John.
always been so supportive of younger players and help lead them down that path. Such great memories. Yes, sir. I have to agree. I don't think that I would have been as pursuant in this career of music had it not been for him and my
Mm-hmm.
dad. I mean, our dads went to school together. I remember like
Isn't
that
that
too, right?
crazy?
So and your dad and my dad went to high school in Bozeman, Montana, right? As
Yep.
little punk kids, and uh, just right after World War II, right? It was just at the end of World War II. So that's
Yeah.
that's crazy. But
Yeah.
um,
I think Dad moved to Bozeman in about 1950 or 51 or something, and
okay,
went to high school here. And I'm sure that's when you met your dad. And
yeah,
yeah, you remember him well. And every time we run into Jerry, uh, they have a good catch up, and and I've always been a fan of your dad too. I mean, he was teaching art. I think wasn't he an artist in residence at the high school?
he was, yeah.
And
He first,
so yeah, he's been a
yeah.
mentor.
It's cool to talk to other people that have had that experience. And when he was a high school teacher in Great Falls, a lot of his ex students had contacted me saying, "Are you Jerry Rankin's kid?" Which I heard all the time growing up. And
Hmm.
I'm actually heading out to see him next week. I'm going to go out with my brother and check in on him. But I love hearing that, and the influence of Dad, the influence of guys like Rob and John Wilson here, for me, just showed me that you could be well rounded and diverse in your musical styles and interests, and hopefully be diverse enough to be able to land you a bunch of gigs.
Yeah.
You talked about your fanaticism for Neil Peart limited opportunities you might have down the road. So as you played in bands in high school and got out of high school, I knew you were doing an original project right out of high school, right? Didn't you have an original band?
Yeah, well, I guess when we were sophomores, we had this band with Jude Bond and Tony Campo and some other guys that we had maybe three songs together, some Depeche Mode and
Hmm.
In Excess right before they popped, and it was a really fun band, and we had a gig lined up at the Baxter, and they told us to come back at midnight to play. We thought we were going to play earlier, and so we went out to Jude's house and had a hot tub party out there, and we never made it back into
Oh
town.
no!
Yeah,
That
so
was your first gig?
that was our first gig. Yeah,
No
but
way! You blew off your very first gig by going to a hot
well,
tub.
yeah, I think so. It was worth it
Okay,
though. It was
yeah,
pretty fun.
nice. That
Yeah.
uh, you know, so coming out of those days in high school, how did you sort of, because I know that the creative paths led you to both filmmaking. You've done a lot of like technical stuff, and I looked at your earlier student films and then the stuff you're doing now. You've obviously got artistic eye across the board. Do you
Oh,
find
thank
now
you.
that like film gives you the same sort of outlet that music has in the past?
I think they're different. I mean, obviously you can bring music into film. You should. It's better that way. But no, I think music is just so much more immediate, and I remember listening to a recording that I made with Dave Arnott up at his gymnasium. We used to record up there in central Montana, and I was listening to it, and I think we were just listening to the drum track or the overhead drum track, and I was like, "What is that sound?" It was just like this almost tuba and throat singing kind of sound or something, and we sort of EQ'd it a little bit, and I could hear it, and it was like a sound coming from my mouth, and I guess it was just like the buzz of drumming, the buzz of music, and you don't get that from making films. Films is a lot more cerebral. It's sort of out of time. Obviously, in music for studio, you can record things and multi-track and do things non-linear, but film is almost entirely nonlinear, and film is almost entirely, time-based and spontaneous. And there's just something that lives in music that is a stronger presence, and it gives you that buzz.
Yeah.
I really miss it this year.
Because I'm not as adept with, the film side of things, it seems to me that you can really experience music at the point in which you're playing and the interaction, right? So it's one thing
Mhm.
to play by yourself, but when you've got interaction with band members of any genre, the listening, the push and pull, the dynamics that you talked about, um, that is this synergistic thing that I would imagine in film you might find at the end, right? So you got the payoff at
Mhm.
the end where you look at this completed project and you think, all right, this is the culmination of all this, blood, sweat, and tears that I put into it, especially if it's a passionate project, right?
Yeah.
But I'm just speculating. Do you find that along the way, are you finding the sort of spontaneous moments where you think in film, are you thinking, okay, this, the creative juices are flowing. I'm getting this huge rush out of this
Mhm.
particular piece. Yeah. All right. So, uh, and have you worked with pretty good sized film crews?
I have. I worked a little bit on this show called FTW, and I think I had Mickey Rourke, and I think it got canceled. But
Oh
we
no.
were building sets out over by Livingston to look like, I don't know, an old shack that they lived in or something like that. But really, I've more worked with crews that I've been directing or kind of collaborating with. I was a director of photography on this film, like a World War II film that my friend Colin McWilliams wrote called War Between Angels. And that was, I mean, we shot that in, was it a day? It was 2 days. Uh, Over kind of by Ruby, Montana, a little, well, I guess over toward where your folks live, but Um, that was a blast. And then I shot this film called Baskin's Eye. It took about a year and a half to shoot and cut, and we probably had 25 extras, maybe maybe 10 main actors and actresses in the cast, and probably a rotating crew of maybe 20 different people. And then I got to shoot with a guy named Mark Vargo. He shot a little bit of The Green Mile, and he worked on effects on The Empire Strikes Back.
Really?
Yeah, and
Yes.
he went to film school here in Bozeman, but he responded to this, post where I was recruiting crew, and he calls me up and he's like, "Hey, I'm a local cinematographer. Let's meet and talk." And I figured, oh, sure, yeah, everybody's a cinematographer in this
Right.
town.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was the real deal, and he shot some beautiful sequences. That Yeah, we had a great time shooting. I learned a lot as a camera person myself, just kind of seeing how he set up shots. And so yeah, it's been a great adventure.
I was thinking about the cruise, because in working with ensembles, different musical
Hmm.
ensembles, the interaction is so important. And I've talked a lot on this show with different musicians about the hang being so important.
Uh-huh.
It's one thing to have this incredible musicianship, but it really doesn't matter if the
Hmm.
interaction is just horrible, right? It's like a relationship. There may be two
Yeah.
people that are incredibly attractive or they're really successful or whatever, but if there's no chemistry, and
Yeah.
maybe they're bitchy, maybe they're an asshole, right? And so in music, it's certainly the same thing.
Hmm.
Non-musicians ask me anyway, about tell me that experience about that one band or that one musician that you recorded with, and um, it's tough because, as you know, we all have bad days. There were people that I met early on in my sort of musical aspirations that I was really disappointed by. The first interaction was really bad, and I thought, "Oh, that person's just an asshole." My first impression was
Hmm.
to label them and judge them, and now I've gone back and I've looked at, so many people that I've met a second and third time when I realized, man, they must have woken up on the wrong side of the bed, or they were stuck in a
Yeah.
tour bus and they were, coffee was bad that day. And, and then I question my judgment, right? Because I realize, we're all capable of being great people or assholes or whatever. And, on a crew where you've got all those extras and all those crew members and, the ability to be malleable and engaging and kind and respectful to all those people in a huge ensemble, right? If you're a director of photography and you've got 40 people that you're sort of commanding the room,
Hmm.
it seems like you've got to really develop interpersonal skills, right? And the ability
Hmm.
to say something without being offensive, or keep the thing rolling, right? You're kind of like herding cats sometimes, and
Yeah.
being a good babysitter. So, tell me about like your dream film gig. Like
Mm.
if somebody came to you and said, here's a budget, unlimited budget. What kind of film would you want to do?
Yeah, that's good. I think it would be something that has a spiritual message to it. Just some kind of little story nugget that sort of speaks for itself, and leaves people with a just feeling changed, and a different outlook and a different philosophy on a certain topic. I haven't figured out what it is yet, but that's what I like. I'm really into shape shifting, um, seeking out shape shifters. You got David Bowie and all these artists that were just constantly changing, and it's pretty fascinating. And those are fairly cosmetic changes. I'm also pretty fascinated by people who change from the inside,
Yeah,
and how they are going along their life and on this track. It doesn't matter what the outside looks like. Um, Maybe on the inside, and I'm speaking from experience here, on the
yeah,
inside, kind of rotting, eroding, not treating people well, maybe doing really good work, but not, like you said, the interaction. That's
yeah,
that's really important. And if you don't have good interactions with people, if you don't leave people with a good feeling about working with you, then they're not going to want to work with you again. You're not building that relationship where each time you can there's Chris back there.
Hey, Chris.
Peeking
No,
in the
tell him hi
door.
for me.
Yeah, well, um, you know, team teams can transcend projects.
Yeah.
Bands can transcend projects, and they do, if you are more interested in the relationship than the work. And that's a tricky balance. It's
Right.
because everyone wants to do good work too. Sometimes you work or you're not going to get the job again. So you got to do both. You got to figure it out. And
You,
um,
you
yeah.
mentioned past experience, that the shape shifting and the emotional development that kind of goes along with that. Where do you feel like maybe you started doing some of that work, where the change started happening for you?
hmm Well, uh, it's a funny story. Yeah. Okay. I would have to say it was when I was really tired of my life, really tired of being all about the quality of the work and not enough about relationships. I had a son that lived in another town. By all inner and probably outer signs, I was a bit of a fail. I was not. I don't know. I considered myself a fail at that point, and so
How old were
um,
you then
I
at that point?
was I was just finished college, so probably about 22.
Okay.
And I'd done a lot of projects, pleased the professors or whatever. Seemed to have a bright future in some ways, but in other ways I didn't. I didn't have a future really. And so I
Why do you say that? Do you feel like you were limiting your future by actions, behaviors, or
yeah, let's see. I don't know. I mean, I didn't want to live that way anymore, and I didn't know how else to live.
okay?
And so I couldn't see the future. Let's just say that. I couldn't
Yeah.
see it. And I had been doing some sweat lodges that the last couple years there, and just local ones here, and really kind of feeling something resonating there. And I'd always kind of been curious about other ceremonies, and I've got to be careful not to get into cultural appropriation here, but I'm just telling my story, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, but I was definitely at a bottom, and I feel like I got called into this next step of my life, which was, Native American ceremony. I don't have any Native American blood, but I'm more of a Celt, and Celts had, dare I say, similar ceremonies. Uh,
Yeah.
and so I think that's maybe where it clicks for me, and where you know I think the Brits did a pretty good job of maybe St. Patrick even stomping out the Celtic ways. Um, so you know, there's these ceremonies have been stepped on too. I think some of them were banned by the U.S. government from, I don't know what, 1920 until Carter made them legal again in '79 or something like that. So that's a pretty strong. I don't know. It's really sad, but so anyway, I just felt a little bit of kinship there, but more than that, I just felt like I was drawn to that. I needed that, and I feel like it called me in because there was an article in the paper that said, okay, there's this guy he's a Sundance chief. He's going down to um, different states, and he's conducting these sun dances, and everybody that's in the lodge has to be sober, clean and sober for a year before they're even allowed in there. And I was just like, oh man, that's exactly what I want and need. I need a group like that, and I want to go and learn about this culture, these ceremonies. And
You
so
you felt like the accountability too was something that you really felt like, okay,
yeah,
this requirement. Okay, cool.
yeah.
All
And
right.
so his picture is on my desk in this tiny apartment that I had getting out of college. And my girlfriend walks, she looks at the picture, and she's like, oh hey, that's my hairdresser. And I was like, really?
Wow.
And she's like, yeah, he works like 3 blocks from here. You want to go talk to him? I was like, sure. So So we went and talked to him, and told him I really wanted to do that, and he said, "Okay, well, then you can keep drinking until the 4th of July, because on the 5th is a full moon, and that's when you'll begin that journey toward the next year, where you get to, if you come to all of our sweats during the year, then you can participate next year." And that was that July 4th. That was the last. That was 1993. That was the last time that I had any of that stuff, and so that was a game changer for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
1993. Wow. That yeah, that's a lifetime ago in a lot of ways. In the sort of that journey, the cultural journey where you were participating in the sweat lodges. And I don't know, I don't know anything about those ceremonies, but I know that a lot of people have used, therapeutic methods that way to sort of develop a spiritual sense, either
Hmm.
finding their own spirituality in themselves or that growth. But you mentioned that that was like the turning point for you, where you saw that um, it was time to evolve. That you didn't feel like you had a future right out of college, but then
Hmm.
that was like and I guess yeah, that was just like a year or so after you were out of school, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like taking a thumbtack that maybe has something on it, maybe doesn't, but it's on the floor in a dust bunny, right? It's just over there, and it's not useful at all. And then something picks it up and puts it into a corkboard, and it's doing something now,
I like the
um,
analogy.
and that's kind of how it felt. It felt like I had a place, and it I can't explain it, but it just got me out of myself. I was so deep in I was all about myself, always had trouble in relationships because I'm just thinking about myself, or just a classmate at school. I'm just all about myself, and that was sort of the first time in my life at maybe age 23 where I'm getting outside of that little tiny circle.
Yeah, it's
And
crazy to think about that now because
yeah.
since you and I have reconnected about 11 years, you're one of the most unselfish people I've ever met. I think about the work that you did to get people into like reunions, for high
Mm.
school, and
Hmm.
your participation, whether it was somebody that you were friends with or not, for the greater good. Just like so, it's one thing that I've been able to observe with classmates, but um, you talked about having that floating time where you felt like you didn't have contribution or didn't really have
Hmm.
purpose. And I've seen you be that person to lend a hand to those people that have been
Mm.
floating. I mean, you and I have talked about that a lot offline, and
Yeah.
classmates or not, there's and I honestly think there's something about where we grew up that was, there was some darkness there, that
Hmm.
really, I don't know if it's that maybe the contribution of like the area changing, the culture
Mm.
changing in that area. But when I go back and I talk to old friends, classmates, bandmates, whatever, I see this look in their eyes where they've gone through a different journey than I've seen elsewhere.
Huh.
Maybe it's because I knew what they looked like before, but um, a lot of people I've seen needing to have that hand reaching out, and so I've
Mm.
seen you do that. And do you feel like you had a better grasp on it early on, or was this sort of an evolution for you over the last 28 years?
Do you mean a grasp on being the hand that helps others, or?
Yeah, because you and I
Uh-huh.
really just reconnected about 11 years ago. And,
Yeah.
prior to that, like over that course of time between 93 and, 19 or 2000, or 2009 or whatever, do you feel like your journey, part of your journey was to, just be sort of a shoulder along the way to kind of say,
Mm.
with your experience, and because there's a lot of wisdom that goes along with that growth. And I would imagine in the cultural side of things, where you got to know more about your own spirituality and all, and even the process of going through a sweat and the ceremonial part of that seems like it would be something that it's not like getting a 4-year degree and being able to share that wisdom with what you
Mhm.
learned in a book. It's a lot
Right.
deeper,
Sure.
right? So do
Yeah.
you feel like you were able to sort of convey that spiritual sense to other people outside outside that group?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Deep one. I don't know. I guess the uh, the best teaching I've ever heard on that is just that we have to be, we have to, the strongest tool that you have in your tool belt is just trying to be an example. Like
Yeah.
trying to show what it looks like to be the shapeshifter or whatever, to be somebody else that couldn't possibly have been this other person back in the day, but
Right.
yet some power greater than yourself makes that possible. And that's sort of the baffling incongruency that gets people asking questions like, okay, you know, what happened there? What would I have to do to start that process if I'm like in a place where I'm just desperate and I can't take, and
Yeah.
or maybe I'm facing a prison sentence, or maybe this or that. Um, you know, Finally you got a fire under you and you want to change. It's a lot better to be a person that can be the hand that's reaching out. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but just
I
it's
think yeah. Like,
from my experience, it's so worth it to try to be that person that is reaching out, than to be the one that's reaching out to help, than it is to be the one that needs the help. And what I mean by that is that, um, in some ways, that's all it takes to be that hand,
yeah.
is to be concerned about looking for other people to help. Uh, that's a big part of what keeps a person being that hand that's helping versus that hand that needs help.
Yeah.
I hope that makes sense.
It does. And I was just thinking, I was thinking about being a parent. I mean, we're both parents, right?
Yeah.
And for me, the grand equalizer really was recognizing as a parent that, you know, for me, the moment my first child was born, life changed. It became so much less
Mhm.
about me and
Yeah.
about them. And then as I've grown and worked on a lot of the spiritual development, the emotional development, I needed that. And that was
Mhm.
much, much later in my life to be able to recognize the deficiencies that I had there, right?
Yeah.
To be the example, and also the unconditional love part is so important, like, like letting go of judgment. I talked about judgment earlier on. Those are things that I'm working on right now.
Hmm.
I've not hit a sweat lodge, but in programs of recovery that I'm working
Hmm.
on, there's so much practice to be able to recognize the growth that I need and not everybody else. So you talked about getting outside yourself and being able and willing to help. One problem that I've had is that I'll go so far the other way. The pendulum will swing so much, and I would
Hmm.
just take on everybody's problems. Right? It was such
Yeah.
such a like total power trip because
Mm.
I was a control freak, and I my son recognized the horrible homelessness sort of epidemic that was happening years ago, and we would go out and we try to contribute and help the homeless in the Portland area, and I was touring a lot, and I'd see that same problem was happening everywhere. And this is way before the pandemic, and I know that it got that much worse. But we would do first weekly, sort of outreaches where we go out and we'd hand out hand warmers and shoes and all this stuff, and then
Mhm.
started doing these big gatherings where we try to somewhat eradicate the pains of being houseless,
Mhm.
um, and I realized over time that it started feeling futile because I could see the homeless issues growing, and I questioned a lot about, all right, am I doing this for them? Am I doing it for me, to pat myself on the back? And I really had to be cognizant of that because I wanted to make sure that I was being of service and not out there trying to serve me. And
Yeah.
I think about that a lot about, I mean, even this show, right?
Mhm.
This show, I questioned it all the time. I'd get off the All Access Live thing. I think, how beneficial the conversation that I've been having are. It's amazing to me to get so much deeper with people that I've known either superficially or even very well, because we have real conversations. And I think, I hope it was good for them, because for me, this is cathartic.
Mm-hmm.
During the pandemic, where I'm a social person and I need to get out there and play music, being able to talk to somebody in a real, vulnerable, authentic, genuine way, even if it shows all my warts, to me, it's therapeutic. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and so, is that
Absolutely.
selfish, right? So I'm thinking about that in the terms of like being, providing a service and to give that shoulder or the support.
Mm-hmm.
I question it a lot, because I think there's guilt associated with my thing, right? A
Well,
lot of times we go through life. I know you and I have talked about that a lot. Like, I don't deserve to be happy. I don't deserve to be
uh-huh.
fulfilled or
I get
whatever.
I get that. Well, here I can make it simple for you.
Okay.
Um, it's just it's a three-word question that can settle that,
Okay.
it's right or not, and that's, is it useful? You know,
Ah,
and yes, your show is very useful. I've learned so much as a musician. There really is no all access when you're watching VH1 behind the band or whatever you call that. You know, uh, it's show business. Like everything is show business. This show is not. This show is it brings show business into it, but uh, you really have developed an all access, uh, I guess, route, for us to really learn some of the ins and outs of what it is to be a musician, a very successful musician that a lot of us want to be, and you've shown us you've humanized a very uh, entertainment oriented world, in my opinion, and that's what I love about your show. And so yeah, it's
thank you.
absolutely useful, and you don't need to torture yourself by wondering if it's too selfish or whatever.
That's my own get up, for everything I
Yeah.
do. Yeah, I'm always questioning, is it useful? Am I being of service? Am
Yeah.
I leading by example? I've asked a lot of people on this show about their legacy, what their like what should their headstone say? I'll
Yeah.
ask you that first. Like, tell me, what is, when at the end of Ken Glynn's days, what do you want people to recognize you for?
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's changing a little bit, but I don't know. I hope it's no time soon. Um,
So do I.
yeah, let's see. Um, well, I think I want it to be both. I want it to be about quality of work or making some kind of a difference in art or in community, and I also want to hit cross the finish line um, with a team of people that we've grown over the years, like doesn't matter if we were competitive siblings in high school. It matters who we're collecting in the process, and I'm really happy with who I'm collecting and I'm getting to work with, and that it's not the music or the film that is front and center.
Yeah.
I'm convinced that we're here to learn how to love each other, and that's what I'm trying to do. So I guess that would be a good legacy if I
That's,
could
yeah.
could figure that out.
I mean, I see you doing it. I
Oh,
do. I see you
thanks.
working that. It's really cool for me to hear people talk about, the effect they had on others, and that had been my sort of moniker. Years ago, Jim Carrey gave this commencement speech to these marketing
Hmm.
students that made rounds in social media, and this video at one of the culmination of his speech, one of his points was, and because they were marketing people too, he said, the effect you have on others is the greatest form of currency there is.
Mm.
And I recognize how important that is, because we can't go through life alone and feel fulfilled necessarily. We need to contribute to our society, to our community, to our families. And in order to really grow, right? I mean, you can do all the work on yourself, but if you don't practice that by sharing some of these skills, then there's no, emotional growth or spiritual growth or anything like that. And when I hear you talk about wanting to have that experience with your community and have reflection on that, um, I see that in you. That's not just a pie in the sky thing. I've watched you do it, and one thing I really, really love about conversations that we've had, if you think about us in high school, right? You go back to
Yeah.
86, 87, 88, everything about those days for me was superficial, right? It was
Hmm.
all about appearance, about image, about, it's what a lot of people go through in high school. But that didn't stop with me there. For a long time, it was a facade of me being able to put forth, to project somebody that I really wasn't, where I
All
thought
of
I
us.
was.
Yeah, you and
Sure,
me
and
both. Yeah.
you talked little bit about this window into successful musician and what everybody would aspire for. I count my blessings for the opportunities I've had, and when I think about success, it's different now than it was back then, right? When I
Hmm.
thought about success in 1988, it was a Ferrari, it was a mansion in Hollywood, it was,
Yeah.
girls on each arm, whatever. Um, and now that I look at it, I think I pinch myself every time I get paid to go on stage, every time I get on an airplane to get flown somewhere, every time I get to meet somebody at a show that felt moved by the show that we had, right? The interaction that we had, because when we're doing these shows, whether they're big or small, I love connecting with somebody, and just eye contact stays all night.
Mm.
And even if I could just have that connection with one person or a couple people and then talk to them afterwards, man, when I see kids there, I'm blown away when we have, 10, 15-year-old kids at a Flock of Seagulls show, because I think there's just no way they could even understand this music, but they're all getting it from movies and video games and their parents. And
Hmm.
and you see the light in their eyes, right? You think about when we were back at that age, how amazing it was to watch
Hmm.
the bands that we would go see. And for me, that is completely successful. I mean,
Hmm.
I would say, had I been in a different career, I'd probably have a little bit of a retirement fund set aside.
Mm.
Uh, but I kind of feel like I've lived retirement for a long time. I've been able to go around the world and
Ah,
meet
yeah.
people and explore cultures. And so ask me about that in another 10, 15 years, and I'll probably cry, um, but that same reflection has been through friends that I've met on the road that I've been able to share here on the show. The Jennifer Batten, a prime example. Jennifer had done all of her tenure with Michael Jackson, and then she went to play with Jeff Beck for a long time. But she moved to Portland in 2005. She called me to book me, or to ask if I was interested in doing a gig, and I was like, "This is not Jennifer Batten. What the hell's Why would she be calling me, and what's she doing here?" But she was referred from two different people, and she went to this jazz club here in town, and she said, she had been doing work with guys like Terry Bozzio, but she wanted to get more of a Bonham guy. And when she mentioned
Ah.
that, two separate people in different bands
Mm.
said, "Oh, you know who you need to call? It's Kevin Rankin."
Sweet.
And but I didn't believe it. And I told her this isn't her. And then she said, "Well, I can call somebody else." I'm like, "No, no, no, no. I'm interested." And um, she's one of those people that she's been on the biggest stages in front of the most people. She's so humble. She
Mm.
never ever let her status change who she was inside. And she's become one of my favorite people on the planet. She's the reason I started doing the show. I
Ah.
did one Facebook Live with our guitarist from A Flock of Seagulls, and she said, "You got an knack for talking to people this way, for
Hmm.
disarming things and making people feel comfortable when we're in the middle of a pandemic. Musicians are freaking out, right? Because the thing that
Hmm.
they did that most fulfilled them is gone
Yeah.
for who knows how long, right?" And
Mhm.
rather than whine about it and bitch about it, we can talk about challenges we've had, maybe successes that people have had in finding a different path to navigate. And when you and I first reconnected, there was nothing superficial about
Mhm.
any conversation we've had. Every conversation we've had has been so deep And for me, I come away just feeling like, wow, I just, it's like a feeling after you get like an amazing massage, right? You go, wow, my brain's wrung out a little bit, my heart's wrung out a little bit, and in a really good way
Yeah, me
because
too. Yeah.
I never felt judged. I'm completely honest with you about my stuff, warts and all. I've never
Yeah.
felt judged, and you've really opened yourself up too. Being vulnerable, and man, to me, it's almost cyclical where it just feeds on that, right? Where I feel like, man, I'm willing to talk openly about a lot of my stuff because of the way that your interaction was.
Huh.
Uh,
Well, thank you.
and
Wow.
yeah, I
I
just never. If you had told me back then that you and I had had that kind of relationship, I would never believe it.
yeah, right.
Really?
Well, yeah, I learned it from other people, and
Yeah,
it's such good medicine. And I agree, it's something that we need to be opening up in the pandemic or just in life in general. Our our whole American society, at some level, is show business, and it is about
yeah,
appearances. And of course, yeah, I mean, the appearance is the reality in a lot of workplaces. So it's something to focus on. But it's good to have this other network of people that you can just spill it out and talk about it. And it's just amazing, the power, like you said, the power that comes into those conversations. And it's way beyond the two people that are talking or the five people that are talking. It's
yeah,
this other power that comes between them. It's like they become like a satellite dish that's receiving, or maybe broadcasting this energy, and
yeah.
and so it, that's what I love about it. And yeah, so I'm glad I got to be a part of you becoming that too, because I feel like we need it. We all need it. So
Uh, you know, yeah. It sounds like this is the mutual admiration society, which it kind of is. But I think about some of the other people that I've reconnected with from school. When I left high school, I had a huge chip on my shoulder. I went through high school judging and feeling judged all the time, which I think everybody does in some regard. And it was really nice to be able to reconnect in a different light where we're adults now
mhm.
as parents. I mean, there are some people that still hang on to that old, um, sort of the appearance, and their priorities are much different. And you can recognize that without being judgmental, right? You can just see, okay, we're just on a different path, and it's kind of cool because you can just take your path and hope that that you align with other people that have it. Have there been people that your relationship has really developed in a real positive way too, and since those days? I mean, do you feel like somebody that just I'll just mention, I mean, there are a good handful of people that I admire a lot, and the more I get to know about them, I love seeing their contributions to things like Paul Anderson, looking what
Yeah,
he's done, in science, long before I realized that that's who my kids were watching in their science classes. He
yeah,
was this amazing contributor online.
yeah,
John Wilson, contributing so much knowledge on YouTube for keyboard, and he does it in a way that doesn't seem self-gratifying. It's just like he's
yeah,
really good at it. He's really engaging, and I enjoyed having him on my show because it just seems like people have these passions that I feel like they're put on this planet to do.
yeah.
And has there been anybody else like that in our classmates that you just feel like, wow, yeah, this person has influenced me in a positive way that you want to sort of give high regard to?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I feel honored to have grown up with those two guys that you mentioned as well. And I'm gonna go ahead and break the rules and say it was you because, um, I think it's real easy to get closed off, to our siblings, or either our biological siblings or our, competing drummers in high school trying to get the spotlight or whatever. And I was all of, and um, I just I really think that you have manifested who you were back then, even underneath all of that, you know. Um, and now you get now you're doing it all. You know, you are you know, working on the spiritual side of things. You're still a very successful musician, and you are a shapeshifter. You know, that's it's fun to watch what, you know, the person you've become, and all the changes you've gone through. I mean, we've been in touch, you know, since we got to know each other in junior high or high school, and I've got to see every step along the way. But I just I mean, I admire you because you're out there on the big stages, that one half of me thinks I need to be out there too. You know, like I need that, um, to feel like a success or something. And the truth is, I can appreciate what my siblings do. I can be really happy for what my siblings do, and consider it maybe a victory of mine too, because you're out there doing it. Um, and I guess at one point I read this book called Romancing the Shadow that changed everything for me about my whole sibling relationship. And it taught me to, instead of competing or trying to steal the spotlight from my sibling or try to make him look bad, which I was in locked in that pattern. Um, just to try to lift him up and to really appreciate what contribution he's bringing to the world. Which he's a my real brother's amazing, you know, comedian, and he's got so many talents, and he's a great uncle to my kids. And once I stopped competing with him, man, could I enjoy our relationship so much more. And same with you, you know, like, I still get jealous seeing some of your posts, especially when you're out touring and stuff. It's like, that's where I want to be. But but it's okay, you know, it's okay that that I'm glad I got a guy that I grew up with that I really respect, that's out there doing it, that I can see that that's possible, and that maybe that's not what I'm here to do, but that maybe you can inspire to do what I'm here to do, you know?
Well, I see you doing it. I mean, that's the
Mm.
thing. When I talked about the legacy, when I see the contributions you've made and the strides you've made to better everyone around you, to me, I feel like, yeah, that success is already there. I mean, that's rock stardom, times
Oh, thanks.
10. Really, as far as like the stages go and music goes, yeah, those things for me were great accomplishments. I always had like these bucket list gigs that I wanted to be able to play, and by God, it's a crazy thing to have like actually gotten some of them,
Yeah.
and there are still more that I'd love to be able to do. But when I really think about the stuff that's fulfilling, it's not about that huge crazy stage. It's just that whole journey, the experience I've had with the bands and my band members has been equally as satisfying. There was a gig just before the pandemic that was like the biggest attended gig I've ever done, and it was goosebumps all the way through. They played 90,000 people in Quebec City, and
Nice.
it was so loud, and I had goosebumps. But I honestly, I can get goosebumps playing a tiny club, 50 people in it, if I feel like the energy is there with people and my band. The pandemic's actually been great for our band members because we've
Mm.
really, we're chiding each other all the time in text threads, and we appreciate what we had so much more by taking a break. For me, that was, you know, it was a silver lining in the pandemic. But any of those shows, we've got coming up, man, I'd love to have you come along. And a bunch of our classmates have met me along the way. I've brought a bunch of people backstage at Fiddler's Green in Denver and had them check out the riser and, see all the groovy stuff that goes on there. And it's fun to share it. It is, because I know that you and I playing, the basketball auditorium back then, um, I think, I know that you would appreciate just some of the cool technical parts of what goes on backstage and
Oh, I'd love
and
to.
on
Yeah.
stage. But that's what this show's all about. Is just bringing light to that experience. And you mentioned humanizing. We're all humans, man. Everybody's got,
Hmm.
like just, whatever financial woes, or the pandemic has been very difficult with health and emotions on families. And um, the divisiveness of politics was really challenging, not just in our country, But as you know, man, you've traveled. When you get outside the country and you recognize, you know, political differences are certainly not, specific to America, nor
Mhm.
is the pandemic, nor are financial issues, nor are health related issues. Every person on the planet has been affected by the pandemic. Every person on the planet has had some kind of financial impact on, from whatever. Um, and you talked about the spirituality. I was in Thailand 2 years ago this month, I think, and I was there for a couple weeks, and I had gone with this former monk to meet a bunch of monks in these temples, and man, that was another shapeshift for me. Looking at how these people had dedicated their lives to bring kindness and peace to people, to be
Yeah.
unconditionally full of love and goodness. And that's why I talked about Mr. Rogers, being like my
Mhm.
hero, man. That I aspire to have any portion of that, right?
Yeah.
If I think of Mr. Rogers or Gandhi or Christ or whatever being Everest, that I
Yeah.
could I could love someone unconditionally and not judge and recognize their faults and welcome them for it. I just want to hit a base camp along that way with that trajectory, aiming up. For me, that's
Yes.
a success. And I think there are a lot of times where I'll get to a point where I feel like, okay, I'm making some progress there, and it's all about progress, right? It's not perfection, man.
Yeah.
But I don't mean to get so damn deep, but that's what we do. You and I, man, we just get into this,
Yeah.
uh, the life goals. Let's lighten it up a second. One thing I ask everybody, and I'll put you on the spot. Doesn't have to be music, but people that know Ken Glenn, what is something that would surprise the heck out of them? What's your guilty pleasure?
Hmm. And it has to be something that nobody knows, or not too many know.
Not too many know. I mean, people that know you either, somewhat well, people would know, yeah, the kind of music you're into or film or anything like that. But, if you're interested in film, but I found out that, your
Yeah.
guilty pleasure was watching some really shitty reality TV show, that's kind of fun to share.
Right. Yeah. The alone. Yeah. That's it's pretty dismal show. It's people slowly dying of hunger. Okay, so I guess that would be one of them, and then another one is well, yeah. When I was in high school in Mr. Adams' English class, I didn't get a good grade, but I did really glom onto John Steinbeck and Grapes of Wrath, and so I wanted to try to write something gritty like that. And so when I was 19, I ran off with the carnival, and I was a carny for that summer, and then also another summer two years later. And so I got to mingle with some pretty unsavory characters, and um, I the goal was to write, some kind of a book about it. And that was okay. So I was 21 last time I was a carny, and I'm 50 now, and that was what 30, 29 years later. Um, Still no book. That's pretty embarrassing, but I'm working on it, and I've got a lot of material I put together. I did do a one act play about Carnival, or sort of one of the scenes that happened in real life when I was working there, and I think finally lately I'm understanding the difference between fiction and nonfiction, like life and art in the writing realm, and I think I'm poised to write something. You would think this pandemic year would have been the perfect year to write it, but it's just been chaos as a parent, and
Yeah.
um, lost my job in August, so I've been hustling for jobs, and so let's just say I haven't made much time to write, but I plan to here as soon as I can, um, and so yeah, I guess the secret would be that I'm a failure so far as a writer, but I plan to change that. So
Oh, let's not even focus on failure. We need to know maybe the craziest thing that happened to you as a carny. You want to share that?
okay, yeah, well, gosh, okay. The first thing that comes to mind, it's not a happy story.
All
Is
right.
that okay?
Yeah. There's no rule here.
Okay. Uh, well, Okay, so we're touring Minnesota. It's 1989. Yeah, it's summer of 1989. Um, and we pick up this guy. We just kind of pick people up along the way, people that were running away from situations or on the run from the law. One guy was still there, dodging the Vietnam draft, and he had become a career carny.
Wow. Okay.
Anyway, this guy joins up, and I'm working on the ride crew, and we're putting up all the different rides, and this guy's he's a Marine, and he's got his own Marine flag, American flag. There's a flagpole that's on the Ferris wheel truck, and so he starts running those flags up every morning, and it was I was pretty irreverent. Always been a fairly irreverent person in certain ways. Maybe less so now, but I really respected that he did that every day, and he had been a Marine, so I appreciated his service, and then it sort of going out to drinks at the bar after work and stuff, found out that he had left a wife and daughter behind, or child behind, in that town that he had joined and left, and he just got sick of the day-to-day life, which I can relate to that. Especially this year. And so
Right.
so he'd be on the phone with them once in a while, or it seems like he was, and it was pay phones back then. It was pre cell phones. And then he about halfway through this. Oh, and by the way, I was sort of on the run from a girlfriend, a pregnant girlfriend at the time. That's okay. That's another secret that's out. So I sort of identified with this guy. Well, his wife and child died in a car accident about halfway through that season.
Wow.
And he was a drinker before, but he was pounding it at that point. He was just medicating, trying to, I don't know. I think he felt immense guilt for having left. And we got to, this is a terrible story.
Well, I was just thinking of where you're going to put that part in the book, because if you're looking at
Yeah,
like where the arc of the plot of the Carney book,
yeah.
I mean, because I would not expect Carney life to be all like sunshine and rainbows at all. So it's like,
Right.
all right, so
Yeah,
he's
I mean,
hitting
it's
it
got its
hard.
moments, but yeah, he's hitting it hard. And then, it's coming to the end of the carnival season. It's in September. We're in northern Minnesota, tiny town, and he was starting to do what's called cheating. Basically, you start pulling the scenery, the painted panels off of the Ferris wheel or the different rides, and you're sort of getting a head start on putting these away under the trucks, because you're going to be up till 3 or 4 in the morning under these lights, deconstructing these big rides anyway, and then you'd be up at 7 to drive about 500 miles to the next place. So this is the last stop of the season, and he's starting to do that, and it's not real clear what the intent was here, but he had been drinking a lot, of course, even just on the job. I think he was dreading the end of the carnival season, because then he might have to face the pain of it
Reality. Yeah.
somehow. And so he took flagpole off, and he was, I don't know if this was intentional or not, but he crossed the transformer, basically the power line that was powering the whole carnival with that flagpole. And they shut the rides, and they were hollering, and they called an ambulance, and the wind was blowing. It was just really eerie, and they're doing CPR on him, and he didn't make it. And so yeah, that's a pretty tragic story, carnival story. I don't think that would be a standalone. You wouldn't want to end a book that way.
No,
but
but I mean, and you could
but
probably start it that way, but you might lose some people after that chapter. I mean, for the
right,
weak stomach.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, was that the end of your carnival experience, or did you have more events?
That was I mean, we were just, after they took him off in the ambulance, we were kind of just kind of stunned and trying to eat something at the cafe after that. And then we drove back to the headquarters, which was kind of near Fargo, North Dakota. and then I got on a bus and came back to Montana because my oldest son was about to be born. So
Okay.
sort of a start of a new thing. But yeah, then I did go back to the carnival a couple of summers later. Yeah, starting to sound like one of those unsavory characters because I was back then. But
Well, I'm wondering, what the allure was, right? It was it just the escape, being able to get rid of real life for a little bit, and
yeah,
because there's, I mean, I can see the parallels for that and touring with a band, same kind of thing, right? I mean,
sure, yeah,
there are unsavory characters, and you're, early mornings and long drives, and
yeah,
it's not all sunshine and rainbows, no matter
yeah.
what
And
anybody thinks.
I hear from my friends in LA, filmmaking in Hollywood too. It's
Yeah,
it's just it's like a gypsy life. And
yeah,
there's a lot of fun stuff about that, but it's it's got its shadows for sure.
will burn people out.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
if if your soul and your spirit are committed to having a life in that, whatever it is, then you can kind of see past some of that grit and have the fortitude to move on. But um, I think we could have spent the entire show talking about your carnival experience, but that's part of your book. I will
yeah.
tell you, man, your writing is fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
We I'm not going to give any of that away, but you and I had shared, some information about, a classmate that was really close and important
Mm.
that you had written about
Ah,
just to be
that's
able to
right.
process.
Yeah.
And that writing was compelling and so well constructed that
Wow.
I think, our classmate, successful authors of Laura Moriarty and Sarah
Mm.
Vowell would probably appreciate your writing talents, and our old writing teachers would probably appreciate the fact that your eyes in the right spot.
Mm.
So I
Thank you
can't
so
wait to read.
much.
I think you've got a lot more books in you than just the Carney book, but
I hope so.
I'd, li-
They're
I'd like to see it translated into film. I think that would be really
right.
cool. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, that would be. That yeah, it could work there.
man.
Yeah.
I really look forward, to continuing the this journey that you and I have been on.
Hmm.
I'm grateful for perspective. There have been a lot of times, man, where you and I have gone through great times or hard times, and I
Yeah.
appreciate the fact that I can just get temperature from you. I say, Ken,
Yeah.
what do you think about this? And you've been able to do the same, and
Hmm.
even wading through technical issues at the beginning of the show, man. We
Oh man.
struck on, and
Oh
it's the way this thing goes. Um,
yeah.
so I will tell people, if you caught on late and you showed up here and you're seeing Ken Glynn, wonderful classmate and a really fun person in my life, and you want to see this later, I'm going to rebroadcast this on Facebook, so you can go back and watch it from the beginning on my Kevin Rankin and All Access Facebook tonight, 7 p.m. Pacific. If you've not yet done so, please subscribe to this channel. I'm going to put the link here because you'll be able to go back and watch an archive of this show and over 160 some odd other episodes of fun and unsavory characters. We'll have lots of boy, you'll see tons of amazing drummers and musicians, and uh, our wonderful friend John Wilson, who's watching the show. He created on the fly a theme song for me, which was amazing and fun and
That was
awesome.
cool.
So please subscribe. We'll find out. I haven't checked my messages here, but Tony Katane's blowing up my phone here to see if we can make something happen for tomorrow. I'm hopeful that we'll be back here at 3 o'clock Pacific with Tony. Thursday, I'm taking the day off. They're going to broadcast a Spin Magazine Twitch TV show that I'm doing. I'm doing a live performance with Mike Skill from the Romantics. I've got a cool band that he put together, and we're going to do about a half-hour set on Twitch TV for Spin Magazine. So I'll put a link to it on my Facebook page. And if you're interested in finding out more about Ken Glynn, then maybe hit him up on his Facebook page and ask for some stories. So, Ken, thank you, man. Thank you so much. And I
Thank you.
appreciate everybody else for being here. I will look forward to connecting with you. I'll be out of Montana in about a week and a half. And so hopefully we can get together for a little bit. And everybody that's watching, be good to yourself. Be good humans. Lend that shoulder like Ken's been doing. All right. Thanks again, folks, for watching. We'll talk to you.